The relentless neon glow of Seoul reflected off the wet asphalt, fracturing into a kaleidoscope of red and blue across the windshield of the taxi. Nia rested her forehead against the cold glass, watching the city blur past. Being a black woman in South Korea meant she was used to eyes following her, curious, admiring, sometimes hostile. But tonight, the sensation of being watched felt different. It felt predatory. She paid the driver and stepped out into the crushing humidity of a July evening in Gangnam, smoothing down the skirt of her silk dress. As the senior conservator for the prestigious Hanel Gallery, she wasn't here to party. She was here to oversee the transfer of a Joseon dynasty porcelain vase that was worth more than her entire life's earnings. The gallery was closed to the public, the front doors locked, but the service entrance in the alleyway was cracked open. A frown marred Nia's features. That door was supposed to be alarmed. She pushed the heavy metal door open, the hinges groaning in the silence. The back hallway smelled of turpentine and old dust, a comforting scent she associated with her work, but beneath it lay something metallic and sharp, the smell of fresh copper. "Mr. Choi," she called out, her voice echoing slightly. Silence answered her. Nia's heart began a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. She moved toward the main exhibition hall, her heels clicking too loudly on the polished concrete. When she reached the archway leading to the main floor, she froze. The gallery wasn't empty. Standing in the center of the room, illuminated by the singular spotlight meant for the vase, was a man. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders as if it had been woven directly onto his skin. His hair was jet black, swept back with severe precision, revealing a face that was devastatingly handsome but colder than the marble floor beneath her feet. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at Mr. Choi, the gallery owner, who was on his knees, trembling violently. And then Nia saw the blood. It dripped from Mr. Choi's nose, staining his white shirt. The man in the suit held a handkerchief, casually wiping a speck of red from his knuckles. "I told you, Choi," the man said, his voice a deep, smooth baritone that wrapped around the English words with a faint, dangerous accent. "The Geumseong syndicate does not tolerate skimming. We built this gallery for you. We can tear it down." Nia stopped breathing. She knew that name. Everyone in the underground world and half the legitimate business world knew the Geumseong. And if this man was speaking for them, he wasn't just a soldier. He was high command. She took a step back, intending to vanish into the shadows, but her heel caught the edge of a floor vent. The metallic clack cracked through the room like a gunshot. The man in the suit didn't flinch. He didn't jump. He simply turned his head, his movement fluid and predatory. His eyes locked onto hers across the dim expanse of the gallery. They were dark, abyssal, and devoid of surprise, as if he had known she was there the moment she entered the building. "A guest," he murmured, the amusement in his voice chilling. Mr. Choi whimpered, "No, please, she's just the restorer. She knows nothing." The man raised a hand, silencing him. He began to walk toward Nia. He didn't rush. He moved with the terrifying confidence of a tiger that knows the gazelle has nowhere to run. Nia's instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like lead. As he stepped out of the spotlight and into the dimness where she stood, the size of him became apparent. He towered over her, his presence suffocating. Up close, the violence radiating off him was almost heat. He stopped inches from her, invading her personal space, forcing her to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. "You have seen something inconvenient," he said softly. He looked her over, his gaze traveling from her terrified eyes to the rich, dark tone of her skin, lingering for a fraction of a second on the pulse hammering frantically in her throat. It wasn't a look of lust, it was an assessment of value and threat. I didn't see anything," Nia stammered, her voice betraying her. "I just came for the vase." A corner of his mouth ticked up, not in a smile but in a smirk of disbelief. "The vase," he repeated. He reached out and Nia flinched, bracing for a blow. Instead, his hand, large and warm, brushed a stray curl of hair away from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, the touch startlingly gentle for a man who had just beaten someone bloody. "You are not from here. American," she nodded, unable to speak. "Then perhaps you do not know who I am. That is good. Ignorance can be a shield." Suddenly, the glass front of the gallery shattered inward with a deafening crash. A Molotov cocktail spun through the broken window, exploding into flames on the reception desk. Gunfire erupted from the street, bullets tearing into the pristine white walls and shattering the priceless pottery. The man's demeanor shifted instantly. The cool arrogance vanished, replaced by lethal efficiency. He grabbed Nia's arm, his grip like iron, and yanked her down behind a marble pillar just as bullets chewed up the spot where she had been standing. "Stay down," he commanded, drawing a matte black pistol from inside his jacket with a speed her eyes couldn't track. He returned fire, 2 controlled shots into the darkness outside. "Who are they?" Nia screamed over the roar of the flames that were beginning to lick up the curtains. "Review critics," he quipped dryly, though his eyes were scanning the exits. "We cannot stay here, the back exit?" he asked. "Open," she gasped. He grabbed her hand, his palm rough against hers, and hauled her to her feet. "Run! Do not let go of my hand." They sprinted through the hallway she had just entered, the sound of heavy boots crunching on glass behind them. They burst out into the humid alleyway rain. A sleek black sedan idled at the curb, its engine purring. A driver jumped out, opening the rear door, but the man shoved Nia in first, diving in after her as another volley of bullets pinged off the car's armored chassis. "Go!" he barked in Korean. The car screeched away, tires smoking, merging aggressively into the heavy Seoul traffic. Nia was hyperventilating, pressed against the leather door, her eyes wide as she looked at the man beside her. He was checking the magazine of his weapon, completely unbothered by the chaos. He slid the gun back into its holster and turned to her. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving cold dread in its wake. She was in a car with a mafia boss, leaving a burning crime scene. You kidnapped me," she whispered. He adjusted his cufflinks, looking at her with that same unreadable expression. "I saved you," he corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "Those men were Viper Clan. They leave no witnesses, especially not beautiful ones who can identify their rivals." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, locking eyes with her. "My name is Min-jun, and until I decide that you are no longer a liability, you belong to me." The silence inside the armored sedan was heavier than the humid air outside. Rain streaked the tinted windows, blurring the neon lights of Seoul into long, weeping ribbons of color. Nia sat rigidly against the door, her hands trembling in her lap. Every time the car went over a bump, her heart slammed against her ribs. Next to her, Min-jun was the picture of composure. He had taken a tablet from the center console and was scrolling through information, the blue light of the screen illuminating the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the blood spatter that still stained his white cuff. He hadn't spoken a word since his declaration of ownership, and that silence was more terrifying than any threat. Finally, Nia couldn't take it anymore. "My phone," she said, her voice sounding small and brittle. "I need to call the police. I need to call the embassy." Min-jun didn't look up. He simply extended his hand, palm open. "Give it to me." Nia blinked. "What? No, I said I need to," before she could finish. He moved with that same blurring speed she had witnessed in the gallery. He plucked the phone from her clutch before she could even twitch. He rolled down the window an inch and tossed the device out into the pouring rain. "Hey!" Nia lunged forward, but he caught her wrist, easily pinning her back against the seat. "The Vipers have trackers that can latch onto a cell signal in under a minute," he explained, his tone bored as if explaining gravity to a child. "Calling the police would be a death sentence. The precinct in Gangnam is on their payroll. If you walk in there, you will never walk out." He released her wrist, his fingers trailing slowly away from her skin. "You are a ghost now, Nia, until the threat is neutralized." The car turned off the main highway and began to climb the winding roads of Gangnam, the district where Korea's ultra-wealthy resided in fortress-like seclusion. They pulled up to the gates of a sleek modernist compound that looked more like a villain's lair than a home. The gates opened automatically, and the car slid into an underground garage filled with luxury vehicles. "Get out," Min-jun ordered as the car stopped. Nia hesitated, but the look in his eyes told her defiance was futile. She stepped out onto the polished concrete, hugging her arms around herself. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her cold and exhausted. Min-jun led her to a private elevator, scanning his palm on a biometric reader. As the doors slid shut, enclosing them in a box of mirrors and gold trim, the proximity to him became overwhelming. He smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and rain. "Why me?" she asked, watching his reflection in the mirrored door. "You could have left me in the alley, I wouldn't have talked." Min-jun turned to face her, filling her field of vision. "You are an American conservator working on a national treasure," he said. "If you turn up dead, it brings international heat. Interpol, the embassy. My business thrives in the shadows, Nia. I do not need a spotlight." He stepped closer, crowding her against the back rail. "And besides," he added, his voice dropping to a murmur that sent a shiver down her spine, "I do not like it when beautiful things are broken." The elevator chimed, saving her from having to respond. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. It was a masterpiece of minimalism: black marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, and art on the walls that Nia recognized as authentic originals worth millions. "The guest suite is down the hall to the right," Min-jun said, shedding his suit jacket and tossing it onto a leather sofa. "There are clothes in the closet. They may be large, but they are clean. Shower, wash the gallery off you." He began to undo his cufflinks. "I have business to attend to. Do not try to leave. The elevators are locked, and the guards at the stairwell are not as polite as I am." Nia watched him walk toward a wet bar, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid. She turned and fled down the hall, locking the heavy oak door of the guest room behind her. She collapsed against it, sliding to the floor. Tears finally came, hot and fast. She allowed herself 5 minutes to cry, then she forced herself up. She was Nia Williams. She had navigated the cutthroat art world of New York and the bureaucracy of Seoul. She would survive this. She showered, scrubbing her skin until it was pink, trying to wash away the feeling of blood and fear. She found a silk robe in the closet that was several sizes too big, wrapping it around her like a shield. When she emerged an hour later, the penthouse was dim, lit only by the city lights filtering in from outside. She found Min-jun on the balcony, leaning against the glass railing, a cigarette burning between his fingers. He had changed into a black button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and covered in intricate tattoos, dragons and tigers fighting in a sea of ink. He didn't turn around. "You are persistent," he noted. "Most people in your situation would be hiding under the bed." "I'm not most people," Nia said, stepping out into the humidity. The view was breathtaking, but she felt like a bird in a gilded cage. "I want to know what happens next, Min-jun. How long do I have to stay here?" He turned then, taking a drag of the cigarette, the embers illuminating his dark eyes. "The Vipers attacked because they believe the vase you were transporting contains a key," he said. "A digital ledger hidden in the ceramic structure. They think I have it. Until I wipe out their leadership or prove the vase is empty, you are a target." Nia frowned. "The vase? It's from the 18th century. How could it have a ledger?" Min-jun flicked the cigarette ash over the balcony. "Technology is small, Nia, and old things are excellent hiding places." He walked over to her, stopping so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. The city wind whipped her hair across her face. He reached out, tucking the strands behind her ear, his hand lingering on her neck. His thumb brushed the pulse point, which was hammering erratically. "You are terrified," he stated, not as a question but as an observation. "Yes," she admitted, refusing to break eye contact. "But not just of the Vipers." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Good," he whispered. "Fear keeps you sharp." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. For a terrifying, electrifying second, she thought he was going to kiss her. The air between them crackled with a tension that was thick enough to choke on. "Go to sleep, Nia," he said softly, pulling back. "Tomorrow we hunt." He turned and walked back into the shadows of the apartment, leaving her standing alone on the balcony, her heart racing not from fear, but from something far more complicated. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, harsh and unforgiving, pulling Nia from a restless sleep. For a moment she forgot where she was. The silk sheets felt too expensive, the air too cool, until the memories of the burning gallery and the gunfight crashed back into her mind. She sat up abruptly. On the foot of the bed lay a box wrapped in black velvet and a note written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Wear this." We leave in 30 minutes. Inside the box was a dress of deep emerald silk, structured yet fluid, along with a pair of stilettos that looked as dangerous as they were beautiful. It wasn't a request. It was a uniform for the role she was about to play. Nia dressed quickly, the silk sliding over her skin like water. When she walked out into the main living area, Min-jun was waiting. He stood by the kitchen island, drinking espresso, dressed in a navy suit that was less formal but somehow more intimidating than the one he wore the night before. He looked up as she entered, and for the first time his composure faltered. The cup paused halfway to his mouth. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in the way the green fabric contrasted against her dark skin, lingering on the exposed curve of her shoulder. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until he set the cup down with a deliberate clink. "Adequate," he said, though his voice was rougher than usual. "Today you are not a conservator. You are my partner. Do not speak unless spoken to, but do not look down. If you look weak, they will eat you alive." "Where are we going?" Nia asked, steadying her voice as she strapped on the heels. "To see a woman who knows everything that happens in this city," Min-jun replied, checking the holster beneath his jacket. "The Vipers are merely a hammer. I need to know the name of the hand that swings it, and to get into her club I need a distraction. You are it." He walked over to her, reaching into his pocket to pull out a diamond necklace. It was cold and heavy as he fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck, sending a jolt of electricity down her spine. "Stay close to me," he murmured against her ear, his breath warm. "If we get separated, you are dead." They took a different car this time, a flashy sports coupe that roared through the mid-morning traffic of Seoul, heading toward the labyrinthine streets of Itaewon. They stopped in front of a nondescript steel door in an alleyway covered in graffiti. A massive bouncer stepped forward, but upon seeing Min-jun's face, he bowed deeply and stepped aside. Inside, the world shifted. It was an underground gambling den, opulent and smoky, filled with the murmur of hushed deals and the clatter of mahjong tiles. The air smelled of incense and expensive tobacco. All eyes turned to them as they walked in. Min-jun placed a possessive hand on the small of Nia's back, guiding her through the crowd. The heat of his palm burned through the silk of her dress. She felt the weight of the stares, gangsters, politicians, and thieves assessing the new woman on the arm of the Geumseong boss. They were ushered into a private VIP room at the back, separated by red velvet curtains. Seated at a round table was an elderly woman with silver hair smoking a long, thin pipe. This was Madame Song. She didn't rise. "Min-jun," she croaked, her eyes sharp as flint. "You bring a foreigner into my house, you are getting reckless." Min-jun sat, pulling a chair out for Nia. "I bring a specialist, madame. The vase that the Vipers destroyed, it was not just porcelain. It was a vessel for the Phoenix ledger." The old woman's expression shifted from boredom to alarm. "The ledger, that myth." "It is real," Min-jun lied smoothly, his face a mask of indifference. "And my companion here can verify that the shards the Vipers recovered are fakes, which means the ledger is still in play." He gestured to Nia. Nia's heart hammered. He hadn't told her this part of the plan. She had to improvise. She leaned forward, channeling every ounce of professional arrogance she had used on snooty art collectors in New York. "The glazing technique used on the Joseon piece in question utilizes a specific cobalt pigment," Nia said, her voice steady. "If the Vipers claim they have it, I need to see only a fragment to prove they are lying. The thermal degradation of the fake pigment would be obvious." Madame Song studied Nia for a long, agonizing minute. Then she laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "She has fire, this one, fine. The Vipers were hired by a third party, a ghost account, but the money was routed through a bank in Macau, a bank owned by your own Lieutenant Min-jun." The air in the room instantly dropped to freezing. Min-jun went perfectly still. "Kang," he whispered, the name a curse. "He has been ambitious lately." It was a betrayal from within. The Vipers were just the hired guns. His own second-in-command had ordered the hit to take Min-jun's throne. Before Min-jun could ask another question, the red velvet curtains were ripped open. A waiter, eyes wide with panic, shouted, "Raid!" But the word was cut short by the suppressed thwip of a silencer. The waiter dropped. Chaos erupted. Men with submachine guns burst into the main hall. "Get down!" Min-jun roared, flipping the heavy oak table onto its side just as bullets began to shred the wood. He grabbed Nia, shielding her body with his own as splinters and glass rained down on them. Madame Song had vanished through a hidden panel in the wall. "We need to move," Min-jun shouted over the deafening noise of automatic fire. He pulled his gun, returning fire blindly over the edge of the table. "The exit is blocked. We have to go through the kitchens." He grabbed her hand, his grip bruising. They broke cover, sprinting toward the service doors. Nia slipped on a patch of blood, but Min-jun hauled her up, practically carrying her as he fired 2 shots into a gunman blocking their path. The man fell, and they crashed through the swinging doors into the steaming, chaotic kitchen. Cooks were screaming, diving under counters. Min-jun didn't stop. He navigated the maze of stainless steel with military precision. They burst out the back door into the alley, but a black van was already screeching to a halt, blocking their path. 4 men in tactical gear jumped out. Min-jun shoved Nia behind a dumpster. "Stay there," he ordered. He moved like a blur, engaging the first man in hand-to-hand combat. Nia watched in horror and fascination. He was a weapon, brutal and efficient, breaking the first man's arm and using him as a human shield against the others. But there were too many. One of the attackers flanked him, raising a knife. "Min-jun, look out!" Nia screamed. She didn't think, she reacted. She grabbed a heavy glass bottle from the overflowing recycling bin next to her and hurled it with all her strength. It smashed against the attacker's helmet, dazing him for a split second. That second was all Min-jun needed. He spun, driving his elbow into the man's throat, and finished the fight with 2 precise shots. Breathing heavily, his suit torn and blood dripping from a cut above his eyebrow, Min-jun turned to her. The rage in his eyes faded as he looked at her, replaced by something intense and raw. He walked over, grabbing her face in his hands, checking her for injuries. His thumbs wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. "You threw a bottle," he said, sounding almost incredulous. I played softball in college," Nia stammered, the adrenaline making her giddy. Min-jun let out a short, breathy laugh, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "Come," he said, his voice low. "We are not safe yet, but now I know who to kill." He laced his fingers through hers, tighter this time, not just as a captor but as a partner. They ran into the labyrinth of the city, the rain beginning to fall again, washing the blood from the streets but not the target off their backs. The safe house was nothing like the penthouse. It was a cramped, dust-moated apartment above a noisy karaoke bar in the labyrinthine district of Hongdae, hidden in plain sight among the throngs of university students and tourists. Min-jun kicked the door shut behind them and immediately slumped against it, the adrenaline finally draining away to reveal the physical toll of the escape. He hissed in pain, clutching his side where a bullet had grazed his ribs, a wound he had ignored until now. Nia dropped the heels she had been carrying and rushed to him, her hands hovering over his torn shirt. "You're hurt," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Badly." Min-jun waved her off, pushing himself upright though his face was pale. "It is a scratch," he grunted, limping toward a rusted medical cabinet in the kitchenette. "I have survived worse." "Sit down, Min-jun," Nia ordered, surprised by the steel in her own voice. To her shock, the terrifying Mafia Boss obeyed, sinking onto a wooden chair with a heavy sigh. Nia found the first aid kit, basic antiseptic, gauze, and surgical tape. She knelt between his legs, her emerald dress puddling on the linoleum floor, and began to unbutton his ruined shirt. His skin was hot to the touch, the tattoos on his chest moving with his labored breathing. As she dabbed the antiseptic onto the angry red gash on his ribs, he didn't flinch. He just watched her. His gaze was intense, stripping away her defenses layer by layer. The silence in the room was heavy, filled only with the muffled bass of the music from the bar below and the sound of the rain against the window. "Why didn't you run?" Min-jun asked quietly, his voice rough. "In the kitchen. You had a clear path to the exit while I was fighting. You could have escaped me." Nia paused, her hands resting on his bare chest. She looked up, locking eyes with him. And let you die, she whispered. I don't think I could have lived with that. Min-jun's expression crumbled, the cold mask of the Geumseong boss fracturing to reveal a man who was profoundly lonely. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. You are a fool, Nia, he murmured, but the words were spoken like a prayer. You should have run far away from me. Now you are in too deep. Already in, she said, leaning slightly into his touch. So tell me, what do we do about Kang? Min-jun's eyes hardened instantly, the predator returning. Kang believes I am dead. He will move quickly to consolidate power. Tonight at the midnight port there is a shipment arriving. It is the pretext he needs to gather the clan leaders and declare himself the new head of the family. He stood up, wincing but ignoring the pain, and walked to the window, peering through the blinds. I go there tonight. I kill him and I take back what is mine. He turned back to her. But you stay here. I will have a cleaner come for you in the morning to take you to the airport. You go back to New York, Nia. You forget you ever met me. Nia stood up, crossing the small room to stand before him. No, Min-jun blinked, taken aback. No, he repeated, his voice dropping dangerously. I am not asking you, Nia, I am telling you. She stepped closer, invading his space just as he had invaded hers in the gallery. You said it yourself, I'm a liability if I'm out there alone, but I'm an asset if I'm with you. Kang expects you to come with muscle. He doesn't expect you to come with a witness who can prove he faked the vase evidence. She poked him in the chest. And I am not leaving you to face an army alone. You need someone to watch your back. Min-jun stared at her for a long moment, a war warring behind his eyes. He was terrified for her, she realized. The monster was scared. If you come with me, he said, his voice straining, there is no going back. If we survive, you cannot just return to your museum and your quiet life. You will be marked. Nia didn't hesitate. The quiet life felt a million miles away. The only thing that felt real was the man standing in front of her. I know, she said softly. Min-jun let out a ragged breath. He closed the distance between them, wrapping one arm around her waist and pulling her flush against his hard body. Then God help us both, he whispered. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision, fueled by adrenaline, fear, and a desperate, burning hunger. Nia wound her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, tasting the copper of blood and the mint of his breath. For a moment the world outside, the assassins, the betrayal, the rain ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his skin and the desperate beat of their hearts. When he finally pulled away, his forehead resting against hers, he looked wrecked. We leave in an hour, he rasped, his thumb brushing her swollen lips. There is a weapon cache under the floorboards. If we are going to crash a coronation, we should be dressed for the occasion. He moved to a loose plank in the floor, prying it up to reveal a stash of firearms and tactical gear. He handed Nia a small, lightweight pistol. Do you know how to use this? Nia weighed the cold metal in her hand. No, she admitted. Min-jun moved behind her, covering her hands with his, guiding her aim toward the wall. Safety off. Squeeze, don't pull, breathe out. He kissed the side of her neck. Aiming is easy. The hard part is deciding to shoot. Can you do that, Nia? Can you take a life to save mine? Nia looked at the gun, then at the reflection of them in the darkened window, the mafia boss and the curator, a match made in hell. She thought of Kang, the man who had ordered the gallery burned, who had tried to kill them in the club. She tightened her grip on the weapon. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I can. Min-jun nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. He began to load a fresh magazine into his own weapon. Good, because tonight we burn Kang's kingdom to the ground. The midnight port lived up to its name. It was a sprawling industrial labyrinth of rusted shipping containers and towering cranes that loomed like skeletal giants against the storm-bruised sky. The air tasted of salt, diesel, and impending violence. Min-jun killed the headlights of the sports car a mile out, and they made the rest of the approach on foot, moving through the shadows like wraiths. The pain in Min-jun's side was evident in the slight hitch of his breath, but his movement was relentless. He was a king returning to claim his throne, and pain was irrelevant. They reached the central warehouse, a cavernous structure where the syndicate leaders had gathered. Through a gap in the corrugated metal wall, Nia saw them. Dozens of men in suits stood in a circle, flanked by armed guards. In the center stood Kang, He looked triumphant, holding a shattered piece of blue and white porcelain aloft like a holy relic. Min-jun was weak, Kang's voice boomed, echoing off the metal rafters. He let sentimentality cloud his judgment. The ledger is lost, destroyed in the fire he failed to prevent. But I have secured our future. The elders have agreed. Tonight, the Geumseong is reborn under my hand. Min-jun checked his weapon one last time, then looked at Nia. The rain had plastered her hair to her face, but her eyes were clear and fierce. There was no trembling now. She gripped the pistol he had given her with white-knuckled determination. "Stay in the shadows until I signal," he whispered, pressing a brief, hard kiss to her forehead. "When the shooting starts, aim for the knees. I will handle Kang." He stepped out into the open, walking through the main bay doors with his hands casually in his pockets, as if he were strolling through a park. "That is a very inspiring speech, Kang," Min-jun called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "But you forgot one detail. You cannot inherit a crown while the king is still breathing." The silence that fell over the warehouse was absolute. Kang froze, the color draining from his face as he stared at the man he thought he had killed. The gathered elders gasped, stepping back. "Min-jun," Kang stammered, his composure shattering. You're dead," Min-jun smiled, a cold, terrifying expression. "I am very hard to kill, unlike you." He kept walking forward, the sea of gangsters parting for him. "You lied to the elders, Kang. You told them the ledger was destroyed. You told them I was incompetent. But you are the one who hired the Vipers. You are the one who burned my gallery." "He lies," Kang screamed, pulling a gun from his waistband. "Kill him, he is alone." "He is not alone," Nia's voice rang out. She stepped from the shadows, the emerald dress ruined by rain and grime, but her presence commanding. She held up a small, sealed evidence bag she had swiped from the safe house. It was empty, but in the dim light it looked official. "I am Nia Williams, the conservator. The vase you are holding, Kang, it's a fake. The real ledger was digitized 3 days before the exhibition. Min-jun has the files. You have nothing but a piece of broken pottery." It was a bluff, a magnificent, desperate lie, but it worked. The elders looked at Kang with suspicion. Panic flared in Kang's eyes. He realized he was losing the room. With a roar of frustration, he raised his gun, aiming not at Min-jun but at Nia. "No," Min-jun lunged. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Gunfire deafened them. Min-jun tackled a guard, using the man's body to absorb the spray of bullets meant for him. Nia dropped behind a crate, gripping her pistol with both hands. She saw Kang maneuvering around the flank, his eyes fixed on Min-jun's exposed back. Min-jun was engaged with 2 of Kang's loyalists, fighting with a brutal, visceral intensity, a knife in one hand and his gun in the other. He didn't see Kang raising his weapon. "Breathe out, squeeze." Nia stood up. The world slowed down. She leveled the pistol, ignoring the chaos around her, focusing only on the man about to kill the person she loved. She pulled the trigger. The gun kicked hard against her palm. Kang jerked violently, a bloom of red erupting on his shoulder. He screamed, dropping his weapon and spinning around, shocked. The distraction was all Min-jun needed. He dispatched the last guard and turned, locking eyes with Kang. There was no mercy in Min-jun's face, only execution. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, grabbing Kang by the throat and slamming him against a shipping container. "For the gallery," Min-jun snarled and buried his knife in Kang's chest. Kang slid to the floor, lifeless. The shooting stopped. The echoes of violence faded, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the rain drumming on the metal roof. The remaining guards lowered their weapons. The elders looked from the body of Kang to the blood-soaked, terrifying figure of Min-jun. Slowly, one by one, they bowed. It was a ripple of submission that spread through the warehouse until every man was bent at the waist. Min-jun didn't look at them. He turned to Nia. She was still standing with the gun raised, her chest heaving, tears mixing with the rain on her face. He walked to her, holstering his weapon, and gently pried the gun from her shaking fingers. "It is over," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply as if she were the only oxygen in the room. "You saved me." 6 months later. The Hanel Gallery had reopened, grander and more secure than before. The winter snow fell softly on Seoul, coating the city in white. Inside, the gala was in full swing. Champagne flutes clinked, and the elite of the art world mingled with politicians and wealthy businessmen. Nia adjusted the strap of her gold velvet gown, checking the display of a restored Joseon vase, not the one that was lost, but a new discovery. She felt him before she saw him. A warm hand settled on the small of her back. She turned to find Min-jun standing there. He was wearing a tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, the scars on his body hidden beneath the fine wool. But his eyes were the same, dark, possessive, and adoring. "The security system?" she asked, arching a brow. "Impenetrable," Min-jun replied, handing her a glass of champagne. "And the perimeter is clear. I checked it myself." "You're paranoid," she teased, taking a sip. "I am protective," he corrected, leaning in close so only she could hear. "I have a lot to lose now." He looked around the room at the life they had rebuilt together. He was still the boss of the Geumseong, still a man of the shadows, but the darkness didn't consume him anymore. He had a tether. "They are waiting for a speech from the director," he said. "That is you, Nia." Nia looked out at the crowd. She had come to Korea as an outsider, a temporary visitor. Now she was the director of the finest gallery in Seoul and the partner of its most dangerous man. She wasn't running anymore. "Let them wait a minute," Nia said, turning back to him. She reached up, straightening his bow tie, her fingers lingering on his chest, right over his heart. "I have a question first." "Anything?" he said seriously. "Are we technically still on the run?" Min-jun laughed, a low, rich sound that made several heads turn. He took her hand, bringing her knuckles to his lips for a kiss that was both a promise and a vow. "No, my love, we are not running. We have won." He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" Nia smiled, slipping her arm through his. "Lead the way, boss." Together, they walked into the light.